Hello and welcome to Finextra TV. We're here reporting from UK Fintech Week at IFGS in London. With me now is Mullen, CEO of Back. Mark, lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Really good to have you on, and I know you're a busy man today. You've just come off a panel session which was about neobanks and whether they're still challenging. So quite a question there. But I want to begin first by taking a step back and looking at how far we've come since, say, the financial crisis in 2008. So set the scene for us. Where are we up to?
Well, since the financial crisis way back when, it seems like an absolute age ago now, there's been any number of initiatives on the part of regulators to strengthen the, if you like, capital adequacy, the capital requirements of the banks, make sure that frankly they're holding more money, and make sure that they're managing their risks more, if you like, cautiously, more prudently. At the same time, they've strengthened the regime about resilience in the aftermath of the sort of, if you like, US election a few years back, and the idea that maybe some sovereign states were undermining the integrity of national infrastructure, and so we've invested very significantly in making sure that banks don't fall over, and if they do fall over, they can stand up again quite quickly.
That's right.
At this, so quite a lot has changed in how banks are looked after, supervised and overseen, but actually quite a lot has also stayed the same. So there's still a relatively small number of very dominant banks. And yet there have been a number of new challengers and new businesses that have, if you like, joined the fray.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for bringing us up to date there. So what's your opinion on areas that might have gotten worse since then and that still need improving? You mentioned resilience there, and that's a real challenge as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not so much worse as not necessarily improved a great deal. If you look at the reputation of banks way back in 2007, 2008, you would have thought, well, gee, it can only really improve from some of those low points. But the truth of the matter is that the general sort of service reputation of banks hasn't really moved on that much since then. And so some of the, if you like, drivers or prompts for change and renewal haven't translated or crystallized into a better result for customers. And that's unfortunate because you'd have expected them to have done so. At the same time, the industry hasn't as a general sort of, if you like, observation, become an awful lot more efficient.
Yep.
So the big banks are still struggling with some legacy issues. They're closing branches, but they're not necessarily changing their cost efficiency ratios, their cost efficiency dynamics. And so it still has an awfully long way to go to truly join the digital age in the 21st century.
All right, so watch this space, it's safe to say. So what do you think is the regulators' role in all of this, and do you think there's more that they could be doing to help?
Oh, the regulator is one of the prime drivers of change in banks. So they do what they're told, not necessarily what they should. To some extent, they follow customers, they follow technology, but really it's a rules-based industry, and you shouldn't forget it. A bank isn't a physical thing. It doesn't require any physical manifestation to exist. It's literally what rules do the regulator write down? And so they've strengthened capital adequacy requirements, they've strengthened resilience and operational resilience requirements. We're about to see consumer duty come in. We're all scratching our head a little bit to try and understand what that's actually going to mean in practice.
Yep.
But it's more focused on, what's the customer's takeout? How does the customer's experience of banking get better or improve? And so bit by bit, making sure banks are financially more stable, operationally more stable, and that they're doing a better job for customers. I think the regulator is fully engaged in it.
And do you think consumer duty will make a big difference?
I haven't got a crystal ball at the moment, because
fine.
we've kind of come off treating customers fairly, and I think the industry had kind of gotten its head around that over many, many years. Maybe the FCA has decided that needs a complete rejuvenation for people to really step up, if you like, to their responsibilities with regard to consumers, because a lot of things really haven't changed in regard to behavior.
Yeah.
So you're still seeing quite high levels of complaints, you're still seeing redress, and right now you're also seeing a question mark over the big banks' willingness to pass on the benefits of interest rate rises, and whether that's actually acting in the customer's best interest is I think.
No, it's really interesting. And what about, big news, especially over the weekend, Silicon Valley Bank. How do you think that crisis failure informs what we've covered so far?
Well, it's very, very dangerous to say it couldn't happen here. It is different, it is unique. There's a set of circumstances around SVB that aren't necessarily reflected in the UK, or indeed reflected, in most other banks. And so there's some pretty fundamental financial risk management failures that were evident there, and some governance failures. But still it has implications. For one thing, it's told everybody that things happen faster who knew that if you can move money in real time, consumers and depositors will.
There we go.
And so that's going to, it's already raised questions about the financial services compensation scheme limit. It will raise questions about liquidity coverage ratios and that regime, the whole liquidity adequacy sort of governance. And for all bankers, when anything happens in the banking industry that wasn't supposed to happen, we all pay attention and try to figure out whether there's something in it that we should be changing about how we run our businesses.
Really interesting. A lot of questions there which need answering, maybe for another time. But Mark, I'll let you get back to the event. Thank you so much for sharing. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.